This is Ever Deeper Honesty, Part 4, starting on page 35. And of course, if a person accepts that life is survival of the stupidest, then they also have to accept that the only wise action is to leave life existence as soon as possible. I.e., the key point is that as soon as the person accepts that the act of having babies is selfish, immoral, cruel, evil, then their whole life gets turned upside down in a very traumatic way. And since people do not like their lives to be turned upside down in a very traumatic way, then what this means is that they'll try to stay in 100% denial delusion. And of course, they can't stay in this denial delusion unless everyone else is also creating, perpetuating, and living in this same denial delusion. I.e., this is why everyone is in denial delusion. And of course, where there is denial delusion, there will always be suffering. Note, all people are in denial delusion to varying degrees, and all people have more than one delusion denial, which are all happening simultaneously. However, the key point here is that the previous few paragraphs are talking about a denial delusion which is on the level of life existence itself, i.e., the brainwashing, programming, conditioning, lies, deceit, denial, delusions, etc. just can't get any bigger than this. Note, what this all means is that two of the deepest programs that everyone is directly and indirectly brainwashing, programming everyone with are the beliefs, lies that 1. Life is good, death is bad, and 2. Existence is good, non-existence is bad. Of course, there are many other similar beliefs which people try to brainwash program everyone with, directly and indirectly, and these beliefs all vary by replacing the word good and bad with some alternate word. Or the long way to say these beliefs' lives would be A. Life and existence is good, precious, special, moral, selfless, acceptable, necessary, etc. And B. Death and non-existence is bad, immoral, selfish, unacceptable, etc. This is very important subject, and I'll examine it in more detail in the long conclusion. The reason why I say that this is a very important subject is because almost everything is based on these two lies, deceptions, brainwashing, programming. And of course, whatever is based on a lie deception is also a lie deception. And therefore, since 99% of life is based on these two lies deceptions, then it's to be expected that 99% of your entire lifetime will involve suffering to varying degrees. And with ever deeper lies, deceptions, the truth of the situation gets even more hidden, and therefore it becomes even harder to stop the cycle of suffering. The only way to truly understand this is to examine just how much is based on these two lies, deceptions, and then keep examining it with ever deeper honesty. Indeed, most of the normal, harmless thoughts in your own head are based on these two lies, deceptions. E.g., a simple thought comment like, I want a glass of water, wouldn't be possible unless there was an underlying belief that life is good, death is bad. Indeed, if you believe that death is good, life is bad, then you would want death and would probably be dead, and therefore you would not be able to want a glass of water because you're dead. And no one would ever consider doing any of the usual things, activities, hobbies in life, e.g., relationships, friendships, family, jobs, having children, etc., unless there was an underlying belief programming in them which was that life is good, death is bad. Note, it's important to realize that this belief, life is good, death is bad, can be easily brainwashed, programmed into people indirectly. Indirect brainwashing programming can be infinitely more effective than direct brainwashing programming because the person has never heard the fundamental program go into them, yet it's running their life, i.e., it's a phantom program. I'll explain the difference as follows. Direct brainwashing programming is where you brainwash program a person with that exact belief. I.e., in this case, a person is brainwashed programmed to believe that life is good, death is bad. And this is done by brainwashing programming them with the belief life is good, death is bad. Indirect brainwashing programming is where you brainwash programming a person with many other beliefs, which require a specific fundamental belief to also exist. I.e., in this case, a person is brainwashed programmed to believe that life is good, death is bad. And this is done by brainwashing programming them not with the belief that life is good, death is bad, but with many other beliefs which require them to fundamentally believe that life is good, death is bad. And it's important to see that almost all beliefs need this fundamental belief, life is good, death is bad, to exist. I.e., everyone has been indirectly programmed with this belief. And most people are totally oblivious to this fact, and the fact that this very fundamental brainwashing programming is running their every decision. Side note, many people talk about how sweatshops are bad, and they also talk about how everyone is bad for buying their clothes from manufacturers who use sweatshops. What everyone is missing is that blaming sweatshops is misdirection. The real people to blame are the parents who brainwash program their children, the employees of those sweatshops, with the belief life is good, death is bad. Indeed, if this belief had not been brainwashed programmed into them, then they would not be working in sweatshops. And if no one in the world had been brainwashed programmed with this belief, then no one would be working in sweatshops, and therefore no sweatshops would exist. The key thing to see is that if this belief, life is good, death is bad, is not in you, then if you ever come across anything in life that is unacceptable, e.g. suffering that is caused by an unacceptable environment activity, then you would simply move away from that environment activity. Note, the reason why I said simply is because you have no fear of moving away from it, i.e. most people don't move away from suffering because they have some fear, desire, etc. However, you have no fear because you know that if all environment activities people are seeing to be unacceptable because they all cause suffering, then you will simply choose to move away from all of them. Moreover, you also know that if life suffering is seen to be unacceptable because it causes suffering, then you will simply choose to move away from life existence. I.e., this applies to everything, all aspects of life, and all levels of life. I.e., the only reason why people put themselves through any suffering in their job, relationships, friendships, etc., is because they have the fundamental brainwashing programming in them that life is good, death is bad. I.e., this is why everyone is suffering. So, this leads to an obvious question. Who is responsible for causing this suffering to everyone? Answer, everyone. Because everyone is constantly brainwashing programming everyone with all types of things, and all these things are indirectly brainwashing programming everyone to believe that life is good, death is bad. So, the situation is that everyone is causing everyone to suffer, and this will continue until everyone recognizes, admits all of this, and stops trying to brainwash, program, use, enslave each other as personal slaves and or work slaves. And one of the main things that people brainwash program their slaves to believe is that suffering is acceptable. And it's also important to see that many people will try to brainwash program everyone to believe in some lies about the purpose and meaning of life, because this will then indirectly brainwash program people to believe that suffering is acceptable. And of course, it's also important to see that the belief suffering is acceptable can only exist if you also believe that life is good, death is bad, and existence is good, non-existence is bad. Note, if you believe that suffering is unacceptable, you will be naturally, inherently unable to have babies, or use and enslave people as personal slaves or work slaves, because you just naturally do not want to cause suffering to others. And a side effect of being like this is that you will suffer a lot less, and some suffering in the world will be reduced, prevented, eliminated. And after you've reduced, prevented, eliminated this type of suffering, you'll then be aware of deeper, subtler levels of existence. And in these deeper, subtler levels, you'll realize that there is suffering in a subtler form. And so you'll naturally want to reduce, prevent, eliminate this suffering. Of course, by the time each level in existence is truly 100% free from suffering, that level will be non existent. And therefore, by the time that this is done for all levels will be non existent. And then what remains is non existence. That. I.e., if a person's society chooses option B, then this belief that suffering is unacceptable is not something that is a permanent part of their life, because it is only there as a tool guide to totally free them and everyone from suffering. And then, when the only thing that remains is that, there is no belief, and no tool, guide, and no person, and no society. And this is also true for all of the other tools, guides in this conclusion, e.g. the tool guide of ever deeper honesty. Side note, I'm saying that these things are guides. However, it's not really a guide because it doesn't tell you where to go or what to do. Instead, it just tells you where not to go and what not to do. I.e., these guides, suffering is unacceptable, and ever deeper honesty, are tools, guides which do not tell you to go to something. Indeed, they do not tell you to go straight to that non-existence. What happens is that as you keep using these tools in ever deeper ways, you realize that everything in existence is malevolent, and then the only thing that remains is that non-existence. I.e., these guides, suffering is unacceptable, and ever deeper honesty, are temporary tools, guides, which will help you to continuously keep reducing, preventing, eliminating suffering, and get ever deeper freedom, peace, love, bliss, until all that remains is that. Note, I'm not trying to make everything end up at this outcome of that. I'm just saying that you need to examine life clearly, honesty, in ever deeper ways. And then whatever observation conclusions are found is what is found. I.e., I did not start from an outcome which I wanted to get to and then make up the rest. I.e., the important thing to do is to deliberately use a solid, indisputable, inescapable start point, because then whatever the outcome, you can't dispute it nor escape it. The reason why this is important is because if you do not do this, then you'll probably do a clear, honest observation of everything in life, and then realize that you don't like the results, conclusions, solutions. So you then go back and fudge the results, or cover over the results, or constantly misdirect, delude yourself and other people away from these results, conclusions, solutions. This is what everyone is constantly doing, and this is why there is so much suffering in the world. So, what is clear from these previous few paragraphs is that there are two important things here. Firstly, all of life must be clearly, honestly observed, i.e., the examination is of all aspects of life and all levels of life, and not one aspect or level of life is missed out, i.e., even the superficial aspects must be examined. I'll explain why all this is true and important in the summary. Secondly, you need to have a solid start point. This will make sure that you can't dispute nor escape from the observations, conclusions, solutions that you find. And this will make sure that you can't then delude yourself. And this will then break your cycle of suffering. Also, since this start point is the neutral, natural, true start point for everything, then it will not only be able to help break the cycle of suffering on an individual level, but also on all levels, e.g., family, community, society, country, planetary, the whole of existence. And since it is free from opinion and agenda, it will lead to conclusions that are indisputable and inescapable, not just for you, but for everyone. I'll explain this neutral, natural, true start point for everything next in the summary. Summary. Before this book can really start, it's important to establish the neutral, natural, true start point for everything. Before I explain what this is and how it comes into existence, I need to go through a brief one-page explanation of why we need a neutral, natural, true start point for everything. So the next page is very basic but necessary, so bear with me. When people interact with each other, they do so because they want something, e.g., a thing, feeling, person, etc. There are many weapons tactics that they can use to get, control, manipulate that person to achieve their desire. But the most common weapon tactic is words, i.e. they'll use and or define or redefine words so that they can 1. Create, sustain, destroy various beliefs, ideas, information, etc. 2. Create, sustain, destroy various rule systems, whether legal, moral, social, interpersonal, personal, religious, spiritual, etc. This happens at all levels, e.g., even within a small group of people, e.g., friends, relationships, etc. Each person will want to try to impose their beliefs, ideas, rules, systems onto everyone, e.g., what everyone in that group should believe is good, bad, right, wrong, morally moral, acceptable, unacceptable, etc. Of course, the only reason why a person group ever wants these beliefs, ideas, rule systems to be implemented and obeyed are because those beliefs, ideas, rule systems will benefit them, whilst being a disadvantage to their competitors' enemies, and this will help them get what they're desiring. The potential problem for this book is that this book wants to reduce, prevent, eliminate suffering, and for a specific type of suffering to be reduced, prevented, eliminated, the true cause of that suffering has to be exposed, recognized, admitted. The problem then comes because most people do not like it when this happens because it threatens to 1. Expose some horrible truths to them and everyone else. Indeed, it's obvious that a person will not want to hear any truths if those truths are going to expose to everyone that person has been doing many selfish, immoral things and causing many people to suffer. 2. Burst their bubble delusions. Indeed, it's obvious that threatening to burst a person's bubble delusions is the worst thing for them, because all people spend most of their life trying to create and or maintain their bubble delusion systems. Of course, since people do not want this to happen, they'll do everything in their power to convince themselves and other people that the information which is a threat to them is not true. There are many ways to do this, and the simplest is to just keep attacking the information which is a threat to them, while also creating and sustaining the beliefs, ideas, rules, systems that are beneficial to them. Indeed, it just becomes a game war where words are the weapons. And if they're beginning to lose the war, then they'll just say things like, your ideas, truths, beliefs are just subjective. There is no truth. There is no good, bad, right, wrong, etc. The key point is that everyone keeps playing these games, wars, and therefore suffering keeps happening for everyone. Therefore, if this book wants to end all suffering for everyone, a method needs to be used which exposes these truths, i.e., the true causes of suffering, and it does so in a way which people cannot argue against nor escape from. The only way to do this is if this book starts from a neutral, natural, true start point for everything, and then continues in an objective, rational, logical way. And part of this process will be to define words in a neutral, natural, true way. And what this means is that the definition of the words used in this book will be fair, equal. And actually, the words will be beyond fair, equal. And therefore, all subsequent statements and conclusions that are based on these words are fair, equal to everyone. So let's begin. A neutral, natural, true start point for everything is something that is true for everyone. And the only way to get something that is true for everyone is if you have something that is real for everyone, One thing that is real for everyone is that suffering is real, or as good as real. Therefore, the neutral, natural, true start point for everything is suffering is real, or as good as real. Of course, this must be provable. However, proof is not enough because what is also important is that this proof is 1. Practical, tangible, real, and not just some theoretical, academic, scientific, religious, spiritual, philosophical nonsense. 2. Able to be done by everyone, i.e., this is not a proof, which is done in an experimental laboratory by only a few people in the world, and everyone else has to accept their findings, proof, and believe that they're not lying, misdirecting you. This is 99% of science. It's just appeal to authority. 3. Able to be recreated as many times as you need, i.e., it's not just something that can be proven on some occasions, but it doesn't work on other occasions. Note, this proof does not really need to be done in practice because it's something that is so obvious. However, there are always some people who want to argue against it so that they can create selfish, immoral, unfair, unequal rules and system beliefs, whether legal, moral, social, interpersonal, personal, religious, spiritual, etc. So if these people need to be demonstrated, proved to them, then, as long as they consent to it, this can be demonstrated and proved to them in the following way. To demonstrate and prove to them that suffering is real, or as good as real, all you need to do is to, directly or indirectly, cause pain, suffering to them, which can be a combination of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual pain, suffering, and then keep increasing this pain, suffering, until it's far beyond their pain, suffering threshold. At this point, they will then admit that 1. Suffering is real, or as good as real. 2. Suffering is unwanted, i.e., they want the pain, suffering to be reduced, prevented, eliminated. 3. Freedom is wanted. They want the freedom to be able to leave this situation of intolerable pain, suffering, in an instant, painless, effortless, guaranteed, permanent way. And if they can't leave this situation of intolerable pain, suffering, then they want the freedom to be able to leave life existence in an instant, painless, effortless, guaranteed, permanent way. I'll explain this in more detail in the long conclusion. I.e., this proves that suffering is real, or as good as real, and from this neutral, natural, true start point for everything can start because we now have something that is real and true. Moreover, because we've now proved that suffering is unwanted, we can now say that any pain, suffering that is inflicted directly or indirectly onto a person is non-consensual. Boom. Unless they actually ask for this to be done to them. So from here, we can now define all other words, e.g. immoral, bad, wrong, etc., i.e., since we now know that pain, suffering is real, or as good as real, and that it's not wanted by anyone, it can therefore be said that a person that creates, perpetuates, increases unwanted, non-consensual suffering, indirectly or indirectly, via their actions or inaction, to another person is doing something that is immoral, bad, and wrong. And if this is done with high intensity or with low intensity over a long period of time, then it can be called cruel. And with even more intensity or time, it can be called evil. I.e., these words have been defined from this neutral, natural, true start point for everything. I.e., the definition of these words are without agenda, and therefore they are fair, equal to everyone. And therefore, any sentences that I create using these words are also going to be fair, equal to everyone. I.e., this is the opposite of what most people do, which is to use such words to attack other people, and or make themselves look good, and or to create unfair beliefs, rules, systems, laws, for whatever their selfish, immoral motives that they have. Note, the issue of truth, words, and definitions, and the dimensions, realms that are beyond all words and truths, will be discussed in more detail in the long conclusion. So, now, let's take this one step further. Earlier on, I mentioned that the person who is feeling pain, suffering that is far beyond their pain, suffering threshold will admit that 1. Suffering is real, 2. Suffering is unwanted, 3. Freedom is wanted. They want the freedom to be able to leave this situation of intolerable pain, suffering in an instant, painless, effortless, guaranteed, permanent way. And if they can't leave this situation of intolerable pain, suffering, then they want the freedom to be able to leave life existence in an instant, painless, effortless, guaranteed, permanent way. What is also important to see is that immediately after point 3, they will then also admit that 4, if they want to move away from pain, suffering, and this freedom is not provided in an instant, painless, effortless, guaranteed, permanent way, then their situation life is prison, torture, slavery, rape. 5. Any people, society, systems, governments, laws, rules, etc., which force people into and keep them in a situation life which is prison, torture, slavery, rape, are inherently selfish, immoral, cruel, evil. 6. There is no middle ground. This is huge too. There is no middle ground. Because the freedom to move away from suffering either exists or it doesn't. Since there is no middle ground, there is no room for discussion, debate, conversations, etc. If the right to move away from suffering does not exist, then this inherently means that it's okay to imprison, torture, enslave, rape people. And this inherently means that the society, systems, governments, laws, rules, people, etc. are pro-torture, pro-rape, pro-enslavement, pro-false imprisonment. And as they go deeper into all of this, it is also realized that the category of evil needs to be split into 2 sections. Evil, a person that does an evil act to a person entity. Ultimate evil, a person that does an evil act to a person entity that they themselves created. I.e., making someone suffer long term is evil, but creating them and then making them suffer long term is obviously infinitely more evil because it's evil on top of evil. And this is what reality is. Note, the term ultimate evil sounds a bit extreme, and therefore it would have been better to use another term. However, there is no other term. However, it's important to remember that this term is just the natural result of the neutral start point for everything. I.e., from this start point, the term evil was derived, and then it was realized that there is such a big difference between the 2 categories of evil, that this difference must be evident in the terminology used. Therefore, since this evil is infinitely more evil than the other category, the term ultimate is correct. And the deeper you examine this at all levels, the more you realize that there's another reason why ultimate evil is a fair, reasonable, logical term. And technically speaking, it's the correct and ideal term to use. The reason why this is the ideal word terminology is because the people who create new people entities are responsible for all the suffering in existence, and therefore they are actually, by definition, the ultimate highest of evil. This is obvious because if people entities did not keep creating new people entities, then existence would end. And then there would be zero suffering and ultimate freedom, love, bliss in as that non-existence. So guys, I read the first 45 pages. Y'all are free to read the rest. But like I said, you really only need to read the first 45 pages. But as you guys can see, it's very, very simple, very straight to the point. But if this didn't expose you to anything, great. I mean, that means that you're in that means that you've already thought about all this, which is great. But if this challenged you and exposed you, that's very good. You have the potential to see existence in life the way that you should be looking at it. Um, and this is even something that you could even, as simple as it is, you could share this with someone else. And I'd be curious. I'm actually may or may not do this with some people that I know just to see just to see their reactions, because I already know who they are as people. So it's more of, are they going to admit to themselves? So I might do that. I might make a video about that. That'll be interesting. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm going to be doing some more reading soon. Let me know in the comments if you guys want me to even continue reading this, or let me know what series you want me to read next. Catch you guys later.